Welcome back to the Mental Performance Masterclass. I am your host, Nick Kleitch, and with me, as always, co-host of the show, Scott Litter, and he is also the owner of Lit Leadership and Performance. Scott, how are we doing?
Fantastic. Really looking forward to talking about motivation again tonight. It's going to be a great topic.
Yeah, we had a really wonderful first episode. And just as a quick refresher, our podcast details and discusses mental performance. We are on season 2 motivation, and this will be episode 2. Haven't quite gathered an official name for this episode, but it's going to have a lot to do with motivational buttons and things that kind of get us fired up. So we were just talking off air on a really nice introduction considering what we had talked about last week, Scott. So I'm going to turn it over to you right away and have you kind of lay the groundwork for the episode.
Well, last week we talked about autonomy, mastery, and purpose as being three key areas of motivation. So we're talking about long-term intrinsic motivation. And I think those things, all three of those, autonomy, mastery, purpose, if you're designing some type of program, class, if you're a coach, all of those are super important to help your athletes or your whoever you're working with be motivated long term. Today we're going to drill down into something a little different because motivation comes in waves, right? All of us feel motivated at times and we don't feel motivated at times, and that's natural, that's normal. So never feel like if you're not motivated that's something wrong with you, because that's a normal part of being a human. And so we're going to talk more today about how do we push our own buttons? As a teacher, I think back to even when I was in school, like we always had the one kid in class that knew how to push the teacher's buttons. This isn't about pushing somebody else's buttons. This is about pushing your own buttons. How do you push your own buttons? How do you trip your own trigger? How do you flip your own switch so that when you need to be motivated, boom, you can make it happen?
Extremely well said. And just as a high level point before we get into the good stuff here, in the first episode, we did mention how we view motivation in general as an igniting tool and as a skill. And this is exactly what we're talking about. We're going to talk about the actual skill set of motivation in today's episode, which is why we broke it out into its own episode. So without further ado, I believe you have a list made up, Scott, of just different types of things that can motivate us. If we're prepared to dive into that now, great. If you have other things to add before we do that, obviously, take it over.
Well, and I work with a lot of athletes, high school and college level athletes, but I also work with business people, right? I work with insurance agents and bankers, and I can tell you that it doesn't matter if you're a ninth grade football player or if you're a 50-year-old entrepreneur, banker, farmer. It doesn't really matter. Motivation's important. We all have to be able to motivate ourselves every day, and we have to know how to do that. So the other thing I want to mention is it's very personal. What motivates you, Nick, is way different than probably what motivates me. And it's also different than what might motivate somebody that's listening today. So I'm just going to give you, I've got 9 or 10 different things that you can use to motivate yourself. You might come up with others, but let's just talk through some of the things that you and I use to motivate ourselves. For me, music's a big one. I've got a playlist with some specific songs that, and my playlist is called Upbeat and Fun. If I'm feeling kind of down, I'm not really ready to get going for the day, I'm hitting that playlist every time. And there's really only 3 or 4 songs on there that will play. And by the end of a couple songs, man, I am ready to go. How about you? Is music something that motivates you?
I view music in 2 different ways here. The first is I like to set the tone of, let's say I'm in a more depressed state or just not kind of feeling good and positive and optimistic. I do have music that can just lighten me up, loosen me up a little bit. This is more kind of dance music, lighthearted pop, things of that nature, to just kind of shift my state from, hey, I am acknowledging right now I'm not in a good mental state. We just got to shift the energy to kind of get some of the energy flowing. And then the other piece is when I'm working out. When I'm working out, I'm listening to a lot more hardcore rock and roll music. I just feel that really gives me the intensity that I'm looking for. But either way, the outcome is before I'm in a state, after I'm now in a more motivated state.
Definitely. I think for most people, music is a way to motivate. And so if you've got a long drive to work, obviously know what songs you need to get yourself motivated. For me, it used to be when I was making breakfast before I go to work. I could tell the days that I needed to pull that playlist up. And I think it's important to really think about, when do you need to push these buttons? So think about that. Is it when the alarm goes off? Is it before work? Is it 3 o'clock in the afternoon? You know, is it Saturday morning? Think about when you need to push the buttons, because these can be really useful if you know when to push them and you know what the buttons are. Next one I'll mention would be a video, a movie, maybe even a podcast. If there's something specific like that that you know motivates you, the Rocky series is something I think of. A lot of people will say that's motivating. For me, I go to YouTube. I watch a coach named Jim Miller, who won 10 national championships at Wartburg. I can listen to that guy for 5 minutes and boom, I'm motivated every single time. And I know you have a little bit different way to motivate yourself through movies, right?
Indeed, I do. I will give credit where credit is due, though, in terms of any good coach or motivational speaker. There's plenty where that comes from. But I actually like to, in some ways, get into specific movie clips. For example, The Gladiator. That one's an incredible. There's so many good scenes within that. The show Vikings, if anyone's familiar with that, or 300, the movie 300 with Gerard Butler. So a lot of war-based, kind of old school medieval guys that they're giving these speeches of, hey, we're going into war for potentially the last time. Stuff like that is what really kind of fires me up. So
And those are great examples. But I'm sure we have listeners who are motivated by completely different things. So, I think you got to find what motivates you. The next one I'm thinking of is a quote or a phrase. And for me, I'm flashing back a lot of years here, but I had a high school football coach named Bob Sadoff, great coach. And I was a 155-pound offensive guard as a senior on the football team. And every week I was playing against people that were 200 pounds or above, and so he would always tell me, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. And 40 years later, over 40 years later, I still remember that quote, and I could still remember him telling me that because I've repeated to myself over and over when I need a little bit of motivation.
it's a thing of beauty. It really is, especially when you have that phrase that you can really believe in. And I would say this is more sports related for myself, but going into meetings as well too, when something's very important to me, it's just taking about 2 to 3 minutes beforehand. And what I will say to myself is, first off, you're made for this moment. I think that that's always important to reiterate to myself, that we're here for a reason. We're made for this moment. Number two is just being fearless. I've been fearless my whole life. It's something that I hold near and dear to me, is that characteristic. Doesn't matter who I'm speaking with. I could be talking to the president. I could be talking to you, Scott, or anybody else. Just, being fearless. And then lastly, just wanting to win, want to come, like just being in the moment, wanting to win the moment. So that's a little bit of my maybe self-talk, if you will. A couple quotes that I absolutely love, that get me fired up, is one by Robin Sharma that I mentioned to you. And that is, those who were seen dancing in the streets were sought at as insane by those who couldn't see the music. Another one by Henry Ford that I love about innovation is, if I would have let the people tell me what they want, they would have asked for faster horses instead of cars, right? So just various things like this motivate me in a way that I want to do something with my life in some way. So that's one way to look at it. I'm sure there's more short-term ways, but that's how I would kind of relay over to you when it comes to quotes and phrases.
Yeah, those are great. I love those quotes. So if you're listening, go find the quotes, post them on the dash in your car, post them in your bedroom, put them on your phone as your screensaver, whatever it takes. I think quotes and phrases are a great way to motivate. Next one on my list is a goal or a vision. And I use this a lot when I work with wrestlers, because um, a goal may be to maybe win a state championship or win a national title, for example. For some people, seeing their hand get raised, imagining that vision of seeing their hand get raised at the end of a match is very motivational. A lot of other people would maybe visualize themselves going up and hugging their mom after they win, for example. If maybe you're working in a business and maybe you're visualizing yourself on a Hawaiian vacation, right? But a vision or goal of some type, and in fact, goals, that's why we post our goals, right? We know that we achieve our goals at a much higher level if we not only write them down, but we post them. And so if you've got that goal up where you can see it every day, that can be a huge motivator.
One thing I'll add to this, Scott, and first off, it's just a phenomenal thing I would encourage anyone to do is sit down and really think about what would really get you fired up. And on that point, don't allow yourself to kind of limit your own thinking. I'm sure you have to work with this with athletes is, hey, you need to dream big here. You need to really allow yourself to like figure out what you want. But what I was going to mention earlier was the late great Jim Rohn, one of the guys that got me into personal development. He always talked about the pull into the future is so much stronger than the running from or the pain of the past when it comes to motivation. So when you have something you're truly excited about, it really can help you get up on a daily basis and go after something big.
Absolutely. And the next one I have down is a person. I've been fortunate to be around some really good coaches, some really good people in my life. I had a college wrestling coach who unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. His name was Greg Lonning. And when I started coaching, and I became a head coach at 23 years old, I was young at West Delaware. And I knew that if I was feeling frustrated, if I was feeling down a little bit, things weren't going the way I thought they should, I could call Greg Lonning, and within 5 minutes, I'd be ready to run through a brick wall. I don't know what it was. He didn't yell. He wasn't loud. He was very matter of fact, but I think he was just a great encourager. And I think when you find somebody that encourages you and that really can push the buttons in you. So again, we talked about pushing our own buttons. I pushed my own buttons by dialing up my old coach, and then he would push my buttons for me. So I think finding that person or people, my high school coach was a lot like this too, Ron Peterson, but finding the right people to talk to reach out to when you need motivation is super important.
So I'm going to take a different stance on this to what you are, and I love that those people were motivating for you. For me as an athlete and being coached, unfortunately, I was a little bit of a shithead sometimes, but I loved the negative of that. So having people that I wanted to prove wrong. Having people I competed against that, let's say in baseball, they went up and got a base hit. And then I said, okay, I'm going to go up and match that. So as much as you can be motivated by positive emotion, you can also be motivated by the negative. And so there was a lot of people in my life that I wanted to prove wrong. And I did that. And that's what kind of got me over the hump is thinking about those people or just in sports competing with them directly.
Yeah, it reminds me of the trick that a lot of coaches use, right? A lot of football coaches, it feels like to me, right? Especially when we used to have actual newspapers, right? Find something where another coach said something negative about you or your team, and you blow that thing up and you post it all over your locker room, right? That negative emotion can be really powerful. And so I think that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. The next thing I have down is a thought. And we've already talked about self-talk a little bit, but I know when I was going in to do my morning workouts as a high school wrestler, the one person, the one thought I would think about every day, I had a nemesis. His name was Randy Kittleson. If you're out there, Randy, hi. I think you're a doctor now somewhere. Very successful guy. He's a super good athlete, but I had a tough time beating this guy. And so every morning when I would head into the school at 6 in the morning to do my morning runs, I would think about, am I outworking Randy today? And I would always think, I've got to make sure I'm working harder than he is. So some type of thought like that, it could be any type of thought, but if you have a thought that you can bring up on a regular basis that motivates you, it can be really effective.
And I'll also throw another spin on this one, Scott. And this is not something we talked about pre podcast, but I often do that to myself in the sense that I ask myself, am I improving from the younger version of myself? That's something I
Mm-hmm.
go through on an annual basis is just kind of an internal audit of just, are we getting better? Where are we getting better? How have I improved this year? Or in terms of a workout, like, hey, the workout we're going to do, we're going to go in here and we're going to crush it. So then that way I'm preventing a worse version of myself from pulling up or getting closer. And I feel like that battle, that internal battle is really great for me. So maybe those out there that have a nemesis, love that as well. I previously just mentioned that. Or if the battle is against yourself, that's always a great way to find motivation too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think always trying to be better than your past self is a fantastic way to think about things. The next one I have is a failure. when you don't succeed, that can be really motivating to some people. Not everybody. Remember, this is very personal. Some people really motivate themselves by thinking about when they failed or when they didn't succeed. For others, that's not motivating at all. So you have to be a little bit careful. But I think if you've had a time where you failed and you thought to yourself, I will never let that happen again. I'm going to work my tail off so hard that it would be impossible for me to fail in that way again. That can be a huge motivator.
Yeah, I don't have much to comment on this one because of kind of what I had just previously mentioned in the last two, but I couldn't agree more. Sometimes there's a motivation and a motivating factor to say, hey, I was so disappointed with that performance. I don't ever want to feel that way again. And so failure is a wonderful teacher.
Yeah, absolutely. And the next one would be a success, right? Sometimes when we have a huge success, we have a breakthrough, thinking back to that moment and how great it felt can be a great motivator. As a teacher, I know one year I had 23 kids. I was teaching an advanced placement calculus exam or calculus class, and all 23 passed the test. Like this was unheard of. And I always went back to that and thought, that felt so good to have everybody in my class be successful because it's really tough to do. And so that really motivated me as a teacher to try to get better and better and better so that I could continue to see that success from my students.
Yeah, and another thing that I would throw in here when it comes to motivation is the ability for motivation to compound and create momentum. That could be probably a whole nother subset podcast in and of itself, but I think that if you're someone that has a feeling of success that you want to emulate, and it's more on the positive side, the more you can visit that feeling and achieve that feeling, that creates unbelievable momentum. And if you're someone that's negatively motivated, use the negative if you need to, but also trickle in that success as a way to, again, keep that momentum going. So yeah, I think in this particular context, consider momentum as much as the feeling that you're trying to go get and replicate.
Absolutely. And I was going to talk about feelings next, and you just mentioned it. I mean, I think a lot of times we're motivated by a certain feeling that we get, whether it's from a success or a failure or from a quote, it doesn't really matter where it comes from. An example for me would be public speaking. I am very motivated to become a better public speaker because when I get up in front of a crowd and I feel like I've done well, I get a feeling that I want to have over and over and over again. And I know I can improve my chances of having that feeling if I continue to get better as a speaker. So that's an example of another one that I use a lot is thinking about that feeling and what it feels like to be up in front of an audience and just really nail a talk.
Yeah, it's a wonderful conclusion for all the things that we've listed out here to know again that there are both positive and negative feelings that can motivate us and push and pull in different ways, but to really lean into that. So maybe the tool or the exercise you can consider at the end of this episode is, when is a time that you felt unbelievable, whether super, super good on a performance or when you felt horrible and you never wanted to feel something like that again. Find that pocket for yourself and understand maybe which one of those two on the spectrum you feel motivates you more, and then really try to find ways to duplicate that in your everyday life. And I think that's how in some ways this is a sports kind of driven episode, because I think sports is an easy place to talk about, but in a business meeting or how you show up in your relationships, that feeling that you have can be so intoxicating in a good way or a bad way to make you do what you need to do through motivation.
It's funny that you said that, Nick, because I don't think we discussed this, but that's exactly what I was going to talk about next. Because, yeah, if you're not sure what motivates you, just start paying attention to when you feel really motivated. If you're driving to work someday and you're like, man, I feel good today, like this is going to be a great day, take some time to reflect on why you feel that way. And maybe even take some notes, right? Maybe even text yourself, email yourself, write down a note, whatever it might be, but pay attention to when you feel really good and really motivated, because when you start becoming aware, you'll be able to repeat that. And that's really what we want is be able to repeat that motivated feeling on a daily basis.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself, Scott. And sorry, I promise I wasn't looking at your notes before we got into the podcast. I know we discussed a little bit, but yeah, the other thing I will throw out here, kind of the peanut butter to your jam in this particular analogy, is we want to either feel that we are driven in our day, that we have something we're going for, and that feeling of being locked in and focused is very rewarding, because then we often accomplish what we need to. But then on the other side of that, reflecting at the end of the day, saying, because of the way we were motivated, we did all these accomplishments and that felt good. And maybe that's what we're trying to strive for. So I usually see it as we're either using it as igniting fuel to create that drive of, it doesn't matter what happens to me today, I'm going to get done what I need to, or maybe they're both of these things too. But the other side of the coin reads, looking back at all the great things you did accomplish, so then the next day you can use it as motivation and gain some momentum. So any other thoughts on motivation here, Scott, as we've covered a lot of great things in this episode?
Well, just a couple things. I think just to tie back to what we talked about last week, we talked about purpose. I think taking time to think about your purpose throughout the day can be really motivating. So again, we talked about a thought being motivating. If you know your why, you know your why you're doing what you're doing, and you take some time to reflect on that and think about that on a regular basis, I think that can be a button. Um, and we're going to talk, I'm not going to go into this tonight here, but next week, I'm really excited about next week, because we're going to talk about alter egos. And and alter ego, man, an alter ego can give you great confidence, and it can give you great motivation. So excited to move from buttons into alter ego next week, Nick.
Yeah, I love that tease. That's fantastic. So, for those that have tuned into the Mental Performance Masterclass, we appreciate you guys and gals giving us a chance to speak on some things that we find very valuable. And then, my final parting kind of homework is maybe re listen to this episode and figure out what the maybe 2 to 3 things are that you can really kind of hone in on and start to cultivate motivation as a skill and use it in your everyday life. So without further ado, we appreciate everyone tuning in, and until next time.